All right, let's talk about selling design systems. Now, if we're going to talk about selling, then we have to talk about salespeople. So, how do you know a salesperson is lying? Their mouth is moving. I know it's terrible. I'm sorry. And if you're a salesperson, I am very sorry. This is totally stereotypical and totally not true. But I'm allowed to tell this joke because a large part of my role is actually as a salesperson. Over the last 5 years, as Sparkbox has done more and more design system work, I found myself working to support our customers in their internal sales process that's kind of required to build a systematic design practice. And what I've learned is that selling is only slimy when you're trying to sell something that people don't need. So today, what I'd like to do is apply some simple, non-slimy sales concepts to what we're trying to do with design systems. My hope is that this will help you get the budgets and the people you need to be able to help create a more systematic design practice inside your organization. For the last couple of years, Sparkbox has been conducting an industry survey on design systems. We had seen this trend in the space for a few years, and it wasn't going away. In fact, it was gaining steam. Almost all of our engagements now involve a design system, from very large enterprise work all the way down to small product startups. And so we, in 2018, decided just to put this out there and see if we could learn a little bit more. That first year, we had over 400 responses from a lot of different industries and just a myriad of different organizations, sizes, and types. It was really insightful. And we also had a lot of responses from various roles inside those organizations, from designers and developers all the way up to product owners and even executives responding. It's really neat. So the next year, we did it again, and we learned even more. You can see the results from both the 2018 and 2019 surveys here, designsystemssurvey.csparkbox.com. And we are actually just releasing the survey for 2020. So we're doing the survey again this year, but we're in the phase where we're gathering information. Now, each of these years, one of the questions that we've asked was an attempt to understand what the real challenges are with design system projects. And so basically, when folks report that their design system is not successful, we dig in a little bit and we try to understand why. Each year, we've kind of landed on sort of the same three primary reasons. It's interesting. The top one usually is a lack of an executive champion, followed closely by adoption difficulties and staffing difficulties. Now, what's interesting about this to me, as somebody who's sort of like, I'm not I'm not writing code for these things every day. I'm sort of helping an organization figure out how to adopt them, or working with our customers on the process to kind of get them adopted internally. But what's funny about this from my perspective is that these challenges, the lack of an executive champion, adoption difficulties, staffing difficulties, these don't have anything to do with the technical side, right? These are all people problems. And like many things in our space, design systems don't fail for technical reasons. They fail for people reasons. Again, this is true for almost all the work that we do. So I believe that each of these challenges could have been addressed if folks had spent a little time thinking about how to sell design systems and then putting those ideas into practice. Now, if you read articles or books on selling, most of them will tell you some version of this very simple idea. Know your customer. The basic idea here is to understand what your customer values, and that allows you to present your product in a way that it is a solution to their specific problem. So as I mentioned, in my role, I've been fortunate to interact with a lot of different folks across organizations. And I've done this in the context of talking about design systems and learning about their challenges. And I've noticed that folks tend to either be sort of internally focused or externally focused. The ones who are internally focused are the people who are caring about how the design system will serve the people inside the organization. And the externally focused people are thinking about how the design system will serve their customers. Both of these are important, and design systems can actually do both well. But I found that it's helpful to break the sort of benefits of a design system down along those two lines. So I think about it like this. There are internal and external motivators for building a design system. Now, I want to examine both of these types of motivators And I want to talk about each of them, and I want to share sort of how we typically express our sort of excitement around these benefits or motivators. But then I also want to think about how we can change our language a little bit to speak more to the folks who are at like an executive level or a product ownership level, the folks that have to sign the checks, right? So let's start with the internal motivators. Anytime you talk about design systems, one of the benefits that always comes up is this idea of efficiency. And we're usually talking about how we'll be able to rapidly prototype new ideas, or we'll talk about this idea of death by 1,000 decisions. And when you open up that blank canvas to design something new, you've got so many tiny decisions to make. And each time you do this in the context of a product that's really that really has a lot of these things already established, you're essentially just leaking creative energy, right? Wasting time making decisions that really have already been made. And so we talk about this idea of death by 1,000 decisions is like, by the time you get to actually solving the new problem, you've solved the old problems 100 times over, and you don't have much energy left to think about the new thing. The other thing that we talk about is reusable patterns, right? This can create a much more efficient approach to doing design work, and how much better our lives could be as practitioners if we could have a set of these patterns that we could just reuse quickly. They're great for folks, especially who are sort of individual contributors in the context of a design system or of a product, designers and developers who are working on products. But what's going through your CIO's mind, or somebody who's internally focused, when you're talking about these things, is something like this. They're smart enough to know they don't get all that efficiency for free, right? So if you think about the productivity of a team over time, without a design system, you slowly ramp up and you kind of reach a theoretical max of productivity based on the size of your team. Now, what we're saying when we tell them that we can be more efficient is, hey, we can reach a higher theoretical max with a system, but they're recognizing that it's going to cost something. And what they want to know is this, right? How long does it take to get from, here at the beginning to this place where we sort of cross the theoretical max and we can do more with the system? They're also probably wondering how deep that trough is, right? That part where you're dipping way down, that means you're not getting other things done in order to do this work, right? Now, of course, all these things are going to vary, but if you go in only talking about the benefit without expressing that you've thought about what it's going to take to get there, then they're not really going to listen to you. So you got to do the math a little bit. You might say, I'll need 3 people half time for 3 months. And maybe you could figure out that will save everybody on your team an hour a day or so, right? I don't know what those numbers would be in your context, but you have to start thinking about things and phrasing them in those terms. This lets them evaluate if it's actually worth doing. And then, of course, in terms of measurement for each of these motivators, I'm going to try to provide a little bit of an idea around what you should measure. With efficiency, you're thinking about measuring the cost of work with and without a design system. And you want to start doing all of these measurement things now before you have one, so that you can compare, and contrast once you have something in place. One of our larger customers did this. In fact, they actually didn't have the measurement so much before, but they went back to, after a year or two into having a design system, they went back to a lot of folks who had used it to execute on product work over the last couple of years. And they said, hey, just imagine like you didn't have that design system. How long would it have taken you to do that work? And then they had people kind of come back with a guess on rough estimates on what things would have cost. And what they learned is that they were getting $3 back for every $1 they spent on the system. And that was really just inefficiency. So mathematically, it made a lot of sense. And that was enough context and data for them to take to their executives and continue to fund the design system work. Another internal motivator that's, I think, super important when you're thinking about design systems is this idea of onboarding. Growth is expensive. If you've ever run a team or an organization, you know this. When you hire somebody, they have this whole time when you're paying them, but they're still not productive, right? So it costs money to kind of invest in your team and then see them slowly over time become productive. But design systems actually are a perfect fit for helping with this. But onboarding isn't really a benefit that I hear us talking about a lot of times outside the context of trying to sort of sell design systems. It wasn't on my mind until one of our customers figured this out. So check out what they do. So if you're an organization that's kind of regularly hiring, you kind of have this group of folks, your hiring pool, people who might be interested in working for you or on your team. When you first hire those folks, bring them onto the design system team. Now, this is going to allow them to learn basically how your organization designs and builds features or products. And then over time, they transition out to some other team. This might be product specific or feature specific, depending on how your organization is structured. And what's really cool about this is now they're essentially an advocate for design systems. They understand your methods, they understand your system, they understand how to put it into practice because they started on that team, and they bring that knowledge as an advocate for the system to these other teams. And then over time, you might, allow folks who haven't had that opportunity to kind of rotate into the design system team. And this process of just sort of revolving folks regularly into the design system team allows them to really understand the core methods that you use to design and build products. I think it can be really helpful, and it can ramp people up to be much more productive in a shorter amount of time, which saves in your growth cost. So what to measure here is the time that it takes for a new hire to become productive. And again, you want to think about that before you have a system. Get some metrics on how long it's taking people to actually be real helpful, productive, contributing members. And then do the same measurement after you have the system in place and be able to show that it's helping people come on board faster. So another internal motivator is this idea of scale. Right, the ability to scale up your team and scale up your productivity, it's greatly increased once you have a design system in place. The problem is that hiring new people creates as many challenges as it does solutions. We have some clients that are responsible for delivering just ridiculous amounts of work, literally like hundreds of new sites over the course of a year or two. These are like large internal teams, on the inside of like multi-brand organizations. And they have to do this all while they're also maintaining all the other sites that already exist. That kind of operation is absolute chaos if you don't have some kind of system in place. UXPin has a really great article in their design system guide. I'll just read a little excerpt from this. They say, scaling design through hiring without putting standards in place is a myth. With every new hire, new ideas for color palettes, typography, and patterns appear in the product, growing the inconsistency and increasing the maintenance cost. Every new hire increases design entropy. Now, this is a pain. If you've been inside of an organization that's growing quickly, you've felt this probably. But a well thought out design system allows you to scale while keeping design entropy at bay. In terms of measurement, you want to think about the amount of work your team can accomplish and how long it takes to get a new idea into testing. Again, thinking about this before and after will allow you to kind of compare these metrics once you have a system in place. And then one final internal motivator that's a little bit abstract, but one that I've noticed quite a bit, is this idea of unity. If you're a leader, or if you have been a leader of a team in the past, you know that you're always thinking about the culture of your team. You're thinking about how critical it is to have a unified group of people working towards something that's bigger than themselves. And I've seen design systems actually help this. I'm going to show my age a little bit with this example, but if you've been around the web for a while, you know all about the Web Standards Project. I think about the work that this group of people did. Actually, I think about it all the time. This project, the Web Standards Project, was like kind of like an inward focused cause that had this very tangible external result. We used to have to build, I literally remember building the same website 2 or 3 times with code, just like an if IE, do this, if Netscape, do this, and like almost like the exact same website 2 times, because these browsers were evolving in very different ways for a season. And the standards movement was really what sort of laid out, hey, here's the things that are going to help all of us. The folks who are making browsers, please adhere to these, and then we as designers and developers will adhere to them, and that'll help us all make more progress quicker. And we can all kind of come together and think about what's going to be best for our users, right? This movement really kind of created a rallying cry for those of us doing the work. And your design system can actually do this for your organization. Design systems really give us a common language to speak. They marry a designer's passion for the experience and the visuals with a developer's passion for the process and performance. They build trust among those roles, and they put us on the same team. I've written a lot more about this in a newsletter that I write called the Be Better newsletter. Check that out if you're interested in reading a little bit more, or hit me on Twitter. I'd love to talk about it. In terms of what to measure here, I think there's this idea of sort of like team engagement or employee engagement. We have like entry, stay, exit polls. We have pulse surveys. There's obviously one-on-one meetings with like a director or, that kind of thing. There's lots of ways to try and measure this. There are some metrics out there that people use. eNPS is one. It's called Employee Net Promoter Score. If you're familiar with NPS, it's just a way to sort of understand at a very regular pace like how people are feeling. And that question I think they use typically with eNPS is something along the lines of, would you be willing to recommend the organization as a good place to work? And so you're asking that of your employees or the folks on your team at a regular basis and just kind of watching the results over time. So that might be one way to kind of measure. Okay, let's shift over to the external motivators. The first one that I always hear is this idea of consistency. And this might be one of the most common benefits of a design system that's out there. We go through exercises like this. I just pulled up Nike's site at the end of last year, and I just captured a few screens. Just landed on the homepage, clicked into shop, into men, drilled in a little bit further here, found a pair of kicks that I liked, added them to my cart, and then went through the checkout process. And just in 4 or 5 screens that we looked at there, with an amazing brand like Nike, love Nike, right? Everybody loves their brand. But in just that simple flow, I found 4 different styles of button, right? And I'm not saying that all of your buttons have to look exactly the same. But when you look at this, you could easily see how there would be a benefit maybe to having these be a lot more consistent, right? And as practitioners, we look at this and we think, why are we doing this? It drives us crazy, right? We need a system. But your product people and your CMO, maybe they're looking at this and they're going to ask a very different question, right? They're going to say, does it convert? And I think instead of talking so much about consistency, we need to maybe shift the conversation a little bit to trust. When you have inconsistent experiences, folks tend to subconsciously lose trust in your brand. This is what a CMO or product ownership or folks who are externally focused, this is what they're paid to think about, right? Getting those customers to trust the brand. Vanessa Mitchell wrote this beautiful piece about why brand trust is more vital to an organization's survival today than it's ever been. I'll just read an excerpt from that. She said, brand trust as an insurance policy against future issues is not a new concept. Most organizations know trust bestowed by the customer can not only make or break a business, it can also ensure you survive a problem in the future. But few achieve brand trust adequately, preferring to pay lip service rather than delve into what it really means, authentically caring about customers and their needs. I mean, if you just imagine your customer sitting on your website, right, and they're trying to accomplish a very specific task. In that moment, the one thing that really matters to them is figuring out that specific task. So creating a consistent experience that works for everyone and allows them to accomplish their goals is building trust. Design systems help you do that. And the way that you measure that is with customer engagement, right? This is the same kind of thing as employee engagement, but asking those questions of your customers. You can obviously look at statistics, activity time, visit frequency, those kinds of things. These are going to vary dramatically by organization and the type of things that you're doing online. But those can be helpful. And also NPS, we talked about eNPS for your employees, but NPS, Net Promoter Score, is a similar kind of thing, but for customers. That would be a way to check customer engagement. Another awesome benefit for folks who are a little bit more externally motivated is accessibility. I love that this is a benefit of a design system. But it's very true. If you think about things like this, I just pulled up our little contact form and started to fill things out here. You spend all this time taking something like a form and making it very accessible, right? And then you have this beautiful code that's sort of like really sort of like you've thought it through. You've solved these accessibility problems, right? And if you're thinking systematically about this, this is wonderful because all of the benefits of the work you've done for that specific form live now inside the pattern and it's ready to be reused. It's great for you and I as practitioners. It makes our jobs easier, keeps us sane. But if we're speaking to leadership, there's kind of a different approach you can take with accessibility. In 2018, we saw a 181% increase in accessibility-related lawsuits over 2017. I think there were like 800 in 2017. There were like 2,300 in 2018. And the stats that I've seen so far, like kind of looking at 2019, show that lawsuits are still on the rise in this area. You probably heard about Domino's last year, right? Big case. Now, this is happening to large and small companies across a wide range of industries. It's really prevalent in retail, travel, food service, and especially banking. And design systems can help us address this issue now, and maybe even more importantly, help us stay compliant as we grow. That's the kind of message that resonates with leadership. We have several customers now who are thinking about design systems, and the primary reason they're thinking about it is accessibility. So this is a real benefit. In terms of measurement here, you want to think about the compliance. How is your site doing? Now, remember that some of this stuff can be tested through automation, but there's a much deeper sort of inclusive design approach here that's a lot more qualitative and not so quantitative. It's a little bit harder to measure. So you have to do the work to kind of measure both to actually see how compliant you're being. And you might also consider measuring accessibility regressions, right? Like tracking how often the same issues kind of resurface, especially with accessibility. It's very common to see, the alt tag on an image just all of a sudden is gone, right? That's a common regression. So measuring the amount of time that regressions pop back up could be a good way to show that the design system keeps that kind of thing from happening, right? Okay, so one last external motivator for design systems, usability. When we talk about this, we're thinking about how if we solve the challenging usability problems once, we won't have to redo that work in the future. And it's true, and that's fantastic. At Sparkbox, we use this phrase that familiarity breeds usability, right? Creating sort of regular, consistent experiences across similar tasks on a web property allows folks to kind of learn how to use your property. And this should be just as important to our leadership as it is to you and I, but we can also reframe this conversation a little bit in the context of conversion. Helping our users accomplish their goals is actually helping them convert. This is kind of what the business needs, and it's also what our customers need, right? Imagine again that moment where your customer is sitting on your site and they just want to accomplish that one task, helping them do so, right? That's creating a more usable experience for them. And really the easiest thing to do here is just to measure conversion. Conversion is one of the easier things to measure. Most organizations are kind of already doing this. So you probably have something like this in place, but if you don't, you're really just thinking about the core tasks that you want your customers to be able to complete, and then tracking their progress through that and measuring when they convert. The idea is that having a more usable experience, having patterns that have been tested and spread around your product by the use of a design system will help usability increase overall, therefore helping your conversion increase. So we had these kind of four on each side, the internally focused and the externally focused. So this gives us a starting point for how we talk about design systems and the benefits they offer with various folks inside our organizations. Really, we're simply reframing the same benefits we talk about all the time, but we're doing it in a way that makes sense for leadership, for executives, for the people who are going to sign the checks. And that means we got to kind of do the work a little bit to understand what's important to them. Now, we've been speaking kind of in generalities, but you might have to get a lot more focused, right? Who should you start with? Who do you talk to? One tool that you can use if you're thinking about this internally is to just chart out in like these four quadrants. And these are kind of extreme language, right? Like saboteur versus advocate. You probably don't have a lot of folks who are like actively trying to sabotage things, but on a scale, you can kind of think about folks who are like more for and more against the idea of the project, of a design system in particular. And then also people who have less influence and more influence inside the organization. And just plotting individuals or teams out in this way can help you. It's really about prioritizing, right? Because what you want to look for, once you've kind of thought through who are the folks you interact with or that you have to convince, then you can sort of focus in on this top left quadrant, right? The folks who are not as excited about it, but who have a lot of influence. Those are the ones who have the opportunity to like derail the work. So you want to focus on those folks first. And what that really means is understand what those folks value, right? This is what we said at the beginning. Know your audience, right? Know your customer. And then what you need to do is shape the project in a way that shows value there. That might shift where you start, right? That might change the things that you tackle first so that you can show value to those folks. Then if those folks with high influence that were against the project become advocates for you, you're going to be unstoppable, right? That's going to be a way to create a lot of momentum for your project. One thing that I like to do, or that we even like to do with those folks, is to ask a question, something kind of like this. You might say, hey, imagine it's a year from now. We're so thrilled with how this design system project went that you wanted to take me to lunch. That's how happy you are, right? Then the question is like, what had to have happened in the last year for this project to be so successful that you wanted to buy me lunch? What this question does is it gets away from the politics, right? It gets into the real motivations, the things they actually care about, why they think this won't work or why they don't think it's a good idea, and they'll explain why they don't think it's worth the investment. Then you can start to dig into what's actually important to them, and maybe you'll see a way to shape that project in such a way that it actually can help with the things they're struggling with. It can completely reframe your perspective on the work, which is kind of what's needed sometimes. So again, turning those saboteurs into advocates, huge deal. If you don't succeed at this, it's going to be really hard to succeed at the rest. It's also important to you don't want to ignore, obviously, the folks on that right side who are advocates already. Especially, I would encourage you to look for those folks from different disciplines than where you are. Obviously, you're going to be an advocate for this, but finding folks in other disciplines that are also on board is going to be huge, because they have a peer group of their own, right? The other folks from their discipline that they can start to then network with and have those conversations with. That's huge. That's important. Having a cross-discipline team is one of the things that we learned in the survey. It's one of the keys to having a successful system. Just lots of folks from different disciplines involved and sort of bought in to the system. Just a couple other points to wrap up. One thing that I see happening a lot is folks who are running design system teams. They have this sort of like, the default is to say no to a lot of things, right? Nobody wants to be told no. And a lot of times I think folks fear design systems because they're afraid it will just be a very strict set of rules they have to follow. What you have to do is talk about your system as an enabler, not as a restrictor, right? If you can focus in on how the design system will allow you to do your best work, right? Let's solve these problems well, and then let's sort of create patterns out of those amazing solutions. That's what everybody wants, right? That's what we want, is to have the best work reach the most customers. So this allows you to focus on new problems instead of solving the same old ones over and over again, right? The other thing you have to think about is creating a process for evolving the system. A lot of the folks that I've been speaking with now who have more mature systems, this is really where they're struggling. They didn't do the work up front to put in sort of tried and true method for how individuals who are using the system in different parts of your organization can contribute back to it, can help it evolve. Because there's no way you get a system built early on that does everything for everybody, and the organization's needs are going to change. So the system has to be that flexible too. So having sort of a process for evolution, for maintenance, for governance, that's critical too. Another thing to think about is that we might shift the conversation away from cost and a little bit more towards investment. Certainly, there's going to be cost to doing this work, but the intent is that it's going to pay us dividends back, right? We went through 8 different benefits, right? 4 internal, 4 external. And these are all things that you get if you are willing to kind of invest in a design system engagement. So there's a lot of benefits to this, and don't play those down and stop talking about it just as a cost. Think about it more as like, hey, we're going to invest in our team, in our culture. We're going to invest in the success of our customers using our products. We're going to invest in the speed, that we can bring new folks up to high productivity on our teams. So thinking about it that way, it's just a shift in mindset, but it can go a long way in those conversations with executives. Remember that successful design systems start with the people. You cannot do this on your own. Your design system project won't succeed if you don't convince the folks around you that it's the right thing to do. I mean, you have to start these engagements by building consensus. This is the only way I know to build a sustainable design system. Remember, building a design system means you're going to ask everyone to change how they work. People hate that, so they have to be on board. And design systems actually help people, right? I mean, if you're struggling with these ideas, if you're thinking, hey, this is not what I signed up for, I do not want to be a salesperson, I get that. If you're like me, you probably started in this business because you like to build stuff. But I would encourage you to remember that design systems actually help people, and they will help you build better stuff. Doing this legwork ahead of time is what allows you to do the thing you really want to do, and it's totally worth it. So I would encourage you to give it a shot. Check out this URL if you want to see the results of our previous surveys. Obviously, once we finish this year's survey, we'll put those results out as well, and they will be at this same spot on the internet. My DMs are open on Twitter, so hit me if you have questions. I'd be happy to do that. I love to talk about this stuff. It's something I get to spend a lot of my time doing, and I really do enjoy it. So hit me there. I would love to chat. If you know folks in the design system space that you think would be good at sharing a little bit about what they're doing, the 2020 Design System Survey is out now. This bit.ly will get you there. We would love for you to help us spread the word. It's really important that we get lots of folks from lots of different places to do that. So thank you so much for listening. Looking forward to chatting a little bit more with some questions here.